Welcome to Bleach Revisited. I am Kar Gold, your host of this series in which we will be reading every single chapter of the Bleach manga, providing critical analysis of the art and narrative, as well as personal response to each of these chapters. We'll also be discussing how the individual chapter connects to the rest of the manga as a whole. As usual, we begin these videos with a reading of the chapter that we are currently discussing for the episode. This is Chapter 121, Insane We Trust. How could this have happened? I failed the enlistment exam 3 times after graduating from the Shino Reijutsuin, the Soul Reaper Academy. Finally on my 4th try, I passed and joined the 13 court guard companies. I was assigned to the 12th company. I actually wanted to be under Assistant Captain Hinamori in the 5th company, but oh well. On my 20th day of service, some Ryoka infiltrated the Soul Society for the first time in centuries. There was talk of a promotion for whoever caught them, but what chance did a new guy have? Then today, the captain himself spoke to us. He had a special assignment for us. Ryoka disguised as Soul Reapers had been discovered, so we were assigned to approach them without arousing suspicion and lure them to the company barracks. It was a dangerous job, but not all that hard if we were careful. It seemed like a great opportunity. I thought I might even get promoted to one of the seats. It would bring me one step closer to Assistant Captain Hinamori. This is my chance. But I'm new. I thought still. I said nothing. I didn't want to look insecure and lose my shot at a seat. How could this have happened? This isn't how it was meant to be. I was just supposed to talk to them and bring them back to the company barracks. This wasn't the deal, Captain Koratsuchi. This isn't... Bleach. Chapter 121. Insane We Trust. Thanks. If you hadn't called me, I'm just glad you reacted in time. That's because you practice so much without using your Kodama, your spirit chant. You're still up? You'll make yourself sick. Okay, just a little more. I finally learned to summon them without calling their names. I'm close to being able to do the move instantly without the Kodama. What about the 3 other people? They're dead. But don't worry about them. You should just worry about yourself. Ha! What a fascinating move. The shield. Is the girl behind you making it? I'm not in the mood for conversation. Marvelous! I've never seen such a thing. You, girl! How would you like to be my research subject? That's enough! We're not making any deals with you. It'll be worth your while. Don't be afraid. I'm kind to women. What the? Why? Is she crying? Is she scared? No, that's not it. She could just hide inside her shield. But she couldn't have risked her life to save me. Then why is she crying for the dead Soul Reapers? Why'd she save me anyway? I'm her enemy. Why would she save me? I don't get it. I know. I'll offer you the best possible terms. I'll restrict the daily drug regime to 8 doses and only 5 hours for biomechanical experiments. You'll be fed orally. Oh, and you'll be given clothing when you sleep. and I'll try hard not to perform any modifications that might kill you. What do you say? These are exceptional terms for a research subject. He's fast. So he's a Quincy. A rare species. It's been years since I last saw one. But I'm sorry. I've already completed my research on your kind. I'm not interested in Quincy's anymore. Now step aside. Completed your research. Not interested. What do you mean? Who are you? The Ryoka charge into enemy territory without studying the enemy first? How foolish. I would think you'd at least know. The top 13 Soul Reapers. I am Captain of the 12th Company and Chief of Research and Development. Mayuri Kuretsuchi. But you can forget that, because in a moment you won't know anything. He's Orihime. Run, now. But, no, I want to fight too. Hey, you from 11th Company, take the girl and run. Are you crazy? Why should I? Because you don't want to die. If you stay here, you're doomed. Force her if you have to. If you don't, I'll shoot you right now. Aw, rats! Come on, let's go, little girl. Did I say you could go? Did I say you could stop them? Listen, boy, I'm not really interested in you. Or so I was thinking when I realized the person shaking down Keiko was his classmate, Tatsuki Arasawa, aka the karate-style killer ape. She's a legendary monster who's rumored to have crushed 2 biker gangs with only her left arm, despite competing in a high school karate tournament this summer. She's so scary. I think she could burn up a stray dog just by staring at it. I was about to pee my pants from her intimidating presence. Maybe that's how classmates show their friendship or something. So I went home early that day. And that is it for Bleach 121. Insane We Trust. I didn't remember the title this time. Surprise. It's a notable title. It's kind of a notable notable title. Let me get back to the beginning. We can talk about this chapter in some depth. There's a lot going on here, so I do want to get into it. We do get this whole background for this Soul Reaper that is getting exploded. He does not get a name, but he does get to blow up in the line of duty. So we've heard about the Shino Reijutsuin, the Soul Reaper Academy. We've heard about that before, right? People that graduate top of their class, people that do really well. This is the average kind of guy. This guy, he failed the enlistment exam 3 times. Finally he had to take it a 4th time, and he was able to join the companies, and he got assigned to a company. So you get assigned here or there, right? Of course, he's got a thing for Hinamori in the 5th Company. That wouldn't work out even if he was hopeful. I think she kind of has her obsessions otherwise, right? But this unlucky guy, he ends up in the 12th Company, the research and development. And as we've seen from characters like Akon and oh boy, I'm trying to remember the other guy's name off the top of my head. Oh boy, with the crank out eye. As we've seen from the research and development guys, you have to be a particular kind of person to get along well there. For normal folks like this guy, they're more the guinea pig test subject, it seems. But this fella doesn't realize that. His naivete is fatal. And so, yeah, we get this kind of moment of shock as he's running away. He's really really good, kind of like humanizing perhaps moment for this guy that was just trying to do his job. And of course, we get this kind of gruesome first person as he reaches out to his captain, who ostensibly is supposed to be his leader, someone that he's loyal to, that takes care of him, and he gets taken care of all right. Very gruesome. We see the flesh exploding outward before he's completely incinerated. And yeah, it's, a bit messed up. Of course, Mayuri, who doesn't even seem to have lips, just broad exposed teeth, seems particularly delighted by exploding all these fellows. His vice captain or his assistant captain, adjunct, whatever you want to call her, Nemu is over there, and she's just plain faced, doesn't seem all that struck. Here we actually get to see Mayuri's Zanpakuto in some detail. He wears it at his crotch because, of course, he does. It's got these various different, like, needles almost sticking out of it. It reminds me a lot of, like, something that's been, like, wrapped up and mummified, and you've like sealed away, and you've stuck these kind of various like pins into it. It certainly reminds me almost of like a voodoo doll kind of thing, or something accursed and foul, but perhaps also could be like something that you're preserving, or that you've wrapped in something, and you've kind of stuck with all these little needles. It's certainly evocative of his personality in a way, that especially the sticking with needles thing, I think always struck me. But of course, the fact of him wearing it strapped here around his crotch, that always, of course, was a little evocative and troubling for its phallic imagery. I mean, it's a sword already, Um, yeah, we get these kind of close-ups. We get a lot of Mayuri this chapter, which is good stuff. We get to see that character in a way that we haven't really yet in a lot of ways. Here we get the shield from Orihime that is Setun Keishun, but regardless, her little shield. And I like that we can actually see the fairy at the very top of it. It's nice detail. You get that here too. So pretty cute. We get, of course, Orihime having protected. At first, it seems like it's Uryu, right? And they have this little back and forth where they're describing. I like how Kubo maybe sneaks in a little moon over there, right here. I think this is supposed to be flashing back to a previous night, and these are the buildings, and that's the moon above them. But little crescent moon snuck in there. We also get a little bit of her hairpin missing some of the pins that became the fairies for that shield, I believe. So, cute little details. But yeah, basically we get this flashback. There's our moon in more detail. So we know that danger looms above them, right? The moon often being, something that comes with the hollows, or comes with the danger that is ever present, the supernatural world overlaid upon this one, right? But yeah, this is I like that we do have that little divider curtain that Orihime set up so that Uryu could have his privacy, his private kind of moments, right? But Orihime has been up all night, kind of practicing with to be able to keep up, and I really like this character moment because this is following. I'm pretty sure I could be wrong. I think this is following the previous battle they had. But nevertheless, you get the sense that Orihime really wants to be able to actually keep up and not be a burden on everyone else, right? And this is yet another moment of her like really pushing herself in her own time, and actually getting results which have literally saved the lives of several people right now. So it's cool to see like her actual training paying off. Would have been nice to get a little bit of this earlier rather than just like retroactively in flashback, because it's easy to be like, oh well, yeah, they trained for this, you know, just off screen whenever I didn't really hint at it before, and you know I could do it in a flashback right now. See all the training that they did? That said, we did establish that they were hiding out in these different little barracks. We had a couple things like that already set up. So, the idea that she would have been practicing then fits. I'm fine with it. So it's not as egregious as like, oh yeah, this whole time I've been practicing this secret technique that I, just off screen. And now because I have a flashback, here it is. Which is something that can happen in a lot of battle manga, a lot of shonen, right? Because you want to lend a little bit of credence, you want a little bit of background to show the character has been developing something rather than they just have it, perhaps, right? But basically, she's been working on this whole thing to be able to summon her shield without having to call out to it, so that she can do it a bit quicker. Of course, you get Orihime, she's quivering, she's really worried about the other people that are here. She cares about these strangers, even if they intended to essentially take her life, or some amount of malice, right? She still wants to make sure that they don't die. The shield shatters, we see her she's already fallen to her knees, but we get this crater from the explosion that had happened. Of course, I think this moment is Uryu turning to speak to Mayuri, right? And so Mayuri is fascinated. This is something that he hasn't seen, which certainly the shield, it being a technique that's born of Orihime's heart, right? That is unique to her. It's something that the scientist Mayuri perhaps hasn't seen because it's unlike the sorts of powers that a lot of people here have. So perhaps there isn't even a Hado that approximates the same sort of shield, right? So he's, trying to figure it out, trying to pin down, what exactly is this? And Uryu kind of shuts him down. We get a lot of this chapter where Mayuri tries to get his way, and Uryu kind of stands in the way and shuts him down. And I really do like this really huge broad panels for Mayuri, and then Uryu kind of just sliding in, being like, nope. Getting Mayuri from behind and Uryu in the kind of background there, Mayuri foregrounded, really sets them up like this kind of antagonists, set up immediately. We already get like this is going to be the focal point of this interaction, which, if you had read everything up to this point already, you kind of got that sense anyway, right? The previous battle with Jirobo kind of was just a teaser for a larger sort of fight, in the same way that perhaps Ikaku was a fight to build up to a larger fight for Ichigo, right? Just as, if you could even call it a fight, is it Tetsufasa? The guy that Chad just knocked out in one hit, kind of built up to setting up for Shanjisui. So you have these little battles that are intermediary, and then the character has to fight a character that is truly challenging, one of these captains, right? And that's what pushes them to their ends. And, certainly we've seen Ichigo just barely win with his life on the line, and we've seen how Chad was not able to clutch even a single hit for victory. And so you have to wonder where exactly Uryu stands, and especially without Orihime's assistance. Of course, we eventually get this kind of interaction here where Orihime has actually, saved this other guy. So the reason why she jumped over here is that she was trying to save the initial guy that was actually going to bring her in, and that was questioning her, and that was about to probably hurt her. And she's actually crying over the deaths of these people. And so you get Orihime cares deeply about other people, and she feels deeply about these strangers. And of course, that's shocking to the Soul Reaper, who's had to become more callous. I mean, literally deals with death all the time, is really used to living in this sort of cynical way, especially a guy from the 11th who's all about personal sort of glory and fighting. Sure, they have camaraderie, but only really amongst their unit. Um, and so he's really struck by the fact that she risked herself to save him, um, and that she's crying for the dead Soul Reapers, all of that, right? So he's a little shocked by just like her humanity, which is a nice defining kind of moment for Orihime, that we get that she has this sort of empathy for others. Of course, as Mayuri, he goes on and on about the sort of terms that he's going to offer Orihime for testing this terrible sort of regime. I love his creepy, really long knell. Oof. Um, he's talking about like drugging her for only so much, doing biomechanical experiments. You'll be fed orally, you'll be given clothes when you sleep, whenever you go to sleep. All of that, right? I'll try not to kill you with any of my modifications. So you get that this guy is a pretty unethical fella, if you hadn't already, which of course harkens to the title, right? Insane we trust. The idea being it's a play on words, right? It's insanity, of course, in insane fellows that they trust. They trust in the sane, rather than insane, right? Which it seems like you could certainly read Mayuri as an insane character. I don't think that he's insane. I think that he's just particularly callous to the suffering of others. Yeah, he's a terribly sadistic, horrible kind of person. He perfectly has his faculties about him, which is perhaps even more troubling. The fact that he is sane, and they do put their trust in him, even though he is the monster that he is. Of course, Uryu immediately appears with his, bow ready to strike right next to Mayuri. I love this moment where he is looking over at Uryu, looks back to where he was, and he's like, "Ooh, he's fast." It's a very anime moment, but I do like that moment quite a bit. Um, and here immediately Uryu deduces, "Oh well, that's a Quincy. You're rare. It's been years since I saw one." Which, if you remember, of course, the Soul Reapers and the Quincy's have had these feuds. Mayuri certainly seems to be, if he's a captain, he's probably among the older characters. So he may even have been around 200 years ago, whenever the Soul Reapers eventually decided that they had to basically do a whole genocide on the Quincy. So, yeah, him saying it's been years since I last saw one, though, implies that perhaps he had interaction with Ishida Uryu's grandfather, Soken. At the very least, someone in Ishida's family, if it's not Ishida himself, given that they are the last Quincy, right? So, of course, he says that he's already completed his research on your kind. He's not interested in Quincy's. And so here again, we get a little bit more that details Mayuri, right? That he's only interested so much in the knowledge that he can gain and the whole sort of inhumane research. He's really evocative immediately of the kind of horrible, sort of like the Nazi scientists or any sort of wartime like doctor scientists that were interested in things like eugenics and human experimentation. A lot of their experiments kind of didn't learn them very much and were done in a way without any sort of control. And yeah, not great stuff. I mean, of course we have remnants of that even today. You see that if you look into things like MK Ultra. Oof. Yeah, it's there's still people doing some pretty messed up things to people that they don't consider human, or that they consider it's fine to kind of just experiment on. And their results aren't entirely scientific, which I don't imagine that Mayuri's, following a method other than what makes sense to him either. But we have yet to figure any of that out. But like I said, he's certainly evocative of some of the worst sort of criminals of history, and I think he embodies that sort of unethical science, right? Which makes for an interesting villain. Certainly one that Kubo seems to enjoy depicting in his grotesquerie and the kind of vile nature that he has. Um, yeah, he berates. I love that he immediately is giving you like a hard time, like, what, you don't get this information, you fool? Which again, it seems common among Soul Reapers in general to kind of look down upon others, especially if they don't know something, right? To call them fools, to kind of really hold themselves in high regards. They all have a different standard for what makes them the smarter, the kind of elite kind of spirits, right? Of course, we get the reveal that this is, of course, Mayuri, captain of the 12th Company, chief of research and development, which the 12th Company is this research and development company, right? They're the ones that are responsible for even kind of finding. I believe that they have the scout, right? It's Hiyosu. Hiyosu's the guy with the crank eye. He had the little bug, I believe, that was able to tape Rukia, and he pulled that up on his feed and was able to get their guy back. So yeah, ostensibly are responsible for perhaps even creating the mod souls, like what Khan is, right? Um, so yeah, we've kind of heard a little bit about these guys before. We've gotten a little bit of like mention of the research and development in the past, like early on in the Bleach. So they were always sort of an element that's been around. But here we get their leader, and we see exactly the kind of person who would making modified disposable souls, right? We talked about the kind of foul ethics of that in the past whenever we were talking about Khan, whenever we were on those parts. So yeah, it's interesting that Mayuri perhaps is a like a kind of development of that, and certainly his design, being like this like person who's modified himself and looks not like inhuman, um yeah, I like that element of him, that he has this kind of crazy, puffy collar coming out of his suit, like he's almost like he's you know just inhuman in all these different ways. I don't know how else to kind of speak about it. um yeah, it's striking for sure. I think he's one of the characters that the design is certainly, oh, you can say, yeah, that's definitely that guy from Bleach, right? Not one that you're going to confuse for anything else. Of course, this very striking back and forth is Mayuri expresses his spiritual pressure, right? His Reiatsu, and our characters feel it for the first time. And this is where you know he insists that Orihime run, and he has this other guy, the 11th Company guy, pick up Orihime and escape with her, because otherwise he's just gonna kill him, right? Really puts this guy between a rock and a hard space. Um, and yeah, just scoops Orihime and runs. Um, of course, we get this great kind of grotesque moment from Mayuri as he throws his arm out, and we have his arm is like detachable. I love the little wiring between it here. So he's go gadgeting for them, and I love like the kind of flicker of blood in these different segments of his arm that we have. It's good stuff. It certainly shows that Mayuri is like capable of doing a lot of damage, and of fighting with things that aren't just his weapon, right? Of course, classic kind of Bleach fashion, we have our character do something cool and then put that line back to the antagonist, right? So whenever and this is probably one of the quicker turnarounds. We've had quicker before, but you know, um, yeah, that did I say you could go, and then in 2 pages he hits them with the did I say you could stop them, right? So again, that kind of back and forth that we've been having, this tension we've been building between Uryu Ishida and Mayuri Kurotsuchi has kind of boiled over, right, as they finally are forced to confront one another. As Mayuri's kind of like, get out of my way, I'm only interested in Orihime, you're nothing, I don't care about Quincy. And Uryu is consistently trying to take control of the situation, and here he finally does, as Mayuri is forced to really look to Uryu, and Uryu addresses him, and we get, of course, yes, he's not really interested in Uryu, and we get this really great close up of Mayuri here, real kind of unsettling as we see the tense muscles in his like painted face. Uh, a split moment where we can see the kind of curvature of his teeth and everything. Yeah, I don't know what's going on with the cones that he has attached to his head. Some sort of augmentation, I'm sure. We get to see a little bit of his hair in those top two panels, but yeah, really great panel of Mayuri, and then that's it for this chapter. Of course, it turns out the person that is shaking down Keiko, I had expected that perhaps it had to do with gosh, what's her name? Ichigo's sister, not Yuzu, Karen. I had thought that it was maybe Karen at a glance, but no, of course, it's Tatsuki who is giving Keigo a hard time, which makes plenty of sense, of course. I like her beat you till blind shirt. That's some good English. And yeah, I love that, like, again, these sort of outsider takes on these characters, right? Where uh, Tetsuki Arasawa is seen as this sort of monstrous, powerful, very, like, terrifying girl. It's good stuff. The karate style killer ape. Yeah, yeah. It's interesting to kind of see these characters from a different perspective, so I do appreciate these little moments. But we'll see, perhaps, if this summer story continues with the next Omake. As far as this chapter goes, I do like this for introducing Mayuri. I always loved his nasty segmented arm thing. Like, you could just make a rocket hand, but the fact that like it's like this bloody, visceral chain arm, yeah, that's really neat. It really immediately makes you like, after all this talk about like biomechanical research and messing with people's bodies, uh, you start to wonder like if like how many other tricks he has up his sleeve, literally or otherwise. Um, I do like this moment for Orihime. I like that we get to see that growth with Orihime, that she's actually developed her powers too, in a way. Because, with all these other characters, we're starting to see, actual development of their powers, which is like fun. You like to see that in the series. So Ichigo, he's learning how to actually use Zangetsu, how to rely on Old Man Zangetsu's power a little bit more. Um, but then also we saw that with Chad, where Chad commented on, exactly how many of those blasts he could send off, all of that, and where his limits were. Of course, Uryu's got everything going on with his glove, and we're seeing the fruits of that. And then here with Orihime, we're getting a little bit of that. I do really like this panel of her shielding them, and then all the stuff at the beginning, right, with the people that get exploded. Mayuri and Nemu, this moment being especially striking for the title. These guys getting pillars of flame, like even just this two panels of this person reaching out and their arm exploding. It's really good. It really establishes the stakes. It establishes kind of how horrible some of these people in Soul Society are, what they can get away with. And I mean, like, honestly, there's like this sense that you're starting to perhaps understand, where the soul of anyone that's not a Shinigami is looked down upon, and then there's some people that even consider other Shinigami souls to not even matter. Because ultimately, if you're in the know, like, okay, well, everybody reincarnates, you know, the individual will just go back to, they'll continue to be in this cycle, right? Perhaps you have a little bit less care for the perhaps like value of a life, which is kind of messed up. It's certainly there's this hierarchy that's happening, definitely, where the Shinigami, and especially the higher seated Shinigami, don't really consider others to be their equals or perhaps even worthwhile individuals, but they have this duty to kind of uphold to do their work of slaying hollows and sending souls along, even for whatever reason they might have. And so for Mayuri, you really see that like he considers these people to kind of be absolutely dispensable, right? It's all for the sake of the research, which continues to kind of progress and live on, even as develop, while these others kind of go through their soul cycle, so to speak. So it's like yeah, it's especially whenever you're like, oh well, what are you going to do if you're this 3-time failure, right? Well, I'm going to put you in my exploding person squad. It's messed up, but like honestly, it's the sort of thing that happens in militaries all the time, right? Where your best and brightest in the country are the people that are going to universities, that are working into positions where they're important to a company or to the government in any which way. Whereas people that perhaps don't have those other avenues of success might be forced into joining the military. And should you be at wartime, well, you're going to be sent to go die. Like, and it's not perhaps that your life is valued less. Certainly, there's a lot done to kind of glorify our soldiers and things like that. But at the end of the day, essentially, there's a lot of governments across the entirety of the world, but uh, almost all of them will use their militaries in modes in which you're going to die. Like you are a disposable unit to a degree. And I mean, like to a lesser extent, that's kind of what corporations do with their workers as well. If you're lower on it, you are just you are numbers, right? You are a cog in a system. Whether or not they fire you and hire somebody else, they do not care because your individuality does not matter to them. Only what you can offer their company, only you as a resource or an asset. And that sort of thinking is dehumanizing, but you see it happen in these different hierarchies and these different organizations all the time. And so it's interesting to see that the 12th Company kind of takes that to this logical extreme. And perhaps it's grotesque and perhaps it's, deadly, but it's not all that different from things that we see. So yeah, a lot of things going on in this chapter. Art wise, yeah, I really do love the way that these characters are depicted. We get some strong moments, especially from Uryu, especially from Mayuri. Weird that Nemu kind of takes a real backseat in this one. I say weird. I mean, it makes sense. She hasn't been ordered to intervene, and I think the fact that she kind of falls into the background, you know, we don't see her, allows her to kind of not be in our mind. So whenever she does show up, it could perhaps be striking. So, that's fine. We'll have to see whenever she does appear later, if she does so, and how she does so, how that gets utilized. But it's something to keep in mind that, like, these other characters are really brought front and center. Um, yeah, yeah. It's a good chapter. It's fantastic, I think, especially for like a proper, serious introduction to Mayuri. As in the past, we've gotten his name, we've gotten a few interactions, but we haven't really gotten a focus on him. And now we get a focus on him, and we see just how troubling of an individual he is. But yeah, what do you think about this one? Let me know. Let me know how you feel about Mayuri. How you feel about all these interactions, what your thoughts are on all this, if you like the chapter or not. All of that I am interested in, so do lay it on me. But yeah, let's talk about spoilers. Let's talk about how this connects to the rest of the manga. Of course, yeah, again, nameless guys joining Mayuri's company, and then immediately being turned into bombs. Like, yeah, that fits. Mayuri is kind of a monster, man. Who knew? I always felt like these like huge pillars of like flame and explosion actually were really reminiscent of the pillars that show up whenever the Quincy invade in the Thousand Year Blood War, which are much larger. But I was always reminded of the same sort of huge explosive pillar of Reishi. Um, of course, you know, we get that little back and forth. We get the fact that she can summon them without using their name, or without calling to them. And again, like that idea of like mastery over something to where you don't have to say its name is something that comes up a lot in Bleach that we get confirmed later. You know, the idea that you don't need to say your Shikai's name to release, or you don't have to use its release command if you master your Bankai. I think that ends up being a thing. The names of things, of course, are very important, and whenever, of course, we get to Ichibei, he really establishes the significance of those names, right? So it's cool here that you know she's gotten to a level of kind of mastery where she doesn't have to call the name to evoke the power. Uh, yeah. Um, it's kind of interesting too that like immediately the shield sort of gets brought up as something really really captivating to Mayuri, and certainly you can make shields with different Hado, or different Keto. I always anyway, I always say Hado instead of Keto, but a different Keto could certainly make a shield. Um, and Mayuri almost certainly would have been knowledgeable of Binahime, which can make a shield because he would have known of Urahara, who literally he owes his position to. So I think he's realizing perhaps that the nature of Orihime's shield, of like the denial, is significant. And this is something that's going to kind of get mentioned a couple times by different characters that are sort of in the know. I know Hachigan and even Aizen kind of comments on the specific important nature of Orihime's abilities. And again, it's all to remind us that they don't function exactly as they say on the tin. They aren't. It isn't healing and a shield. It's rejection of events, which is significant to defeating Yuha Bak. So yeah, I do like that. Like there is consistent like refrain of the significance and the importance and unique nature of Orihime's shield. Um, is this guy's name Tatsumaki or Maki something? I thought that he died here, but I guess he does survive. I just remember this greasy dude. It's been a long time since I read Bleach, so I forgot that he existed as a character until I saw him, and then I was like, yeah, that guy's strikingly familiar, but for reasons I don't quite remember. Of course, like the other big connection here is obviously that Mayuri, even seeing the Sandray glove, even seeing this bow, he's like, oh well, it's a Quincy, right? That he's incredibly familiar even with this use of the glove itself. Well, I don't know if he's like at the Let Still is something that he knows about or not. I imagine he does. I'll have to get to the later chapters to really confirm that. But certainly like the idea is that Mayuri is very aware of who the Quincy are because he is the one that was responsible for like torturing Ryu's grandfather, right? So there's that whole thing. So it's kind of interesting that yeah, Mary would have been really kind of intimately familiar, not just with the Quincy, but with the sort of techniques that Uryu is using because Mayuri has done so much research on the Ishida clan. Um, it's interesting that he says, he's completed his research, and maybe that shows like a bit of immaturity or, kind of failure on Mayuri's part in the long run, because as we come to find out, yes, there are Quincy literally in the shadows of the Soul Society who have developed, through their own research, superior kind of modes, the Volstandig, right? So, you got the Volstandig, you got all the different kind of extremes of these Quincy powers that Mayuri probably isn't keen on. That he certainly could have maybe figured out with more research. But it's interesting that perhaps he figures like he's already figured this all out and sees it as dead end, in the same way that the Quincy of the Vondenreich feel about Uryu's own, or I guess Ishida's own techniques, right? It's, curious to think about, right? Nevertheless, more Mayuri stuff. I don't know that there's any other kind of big connections. Obviously, we get the confirmation that Mayuri has modified his own body, which will come up several times throughout the manga and almost every major fight that he's in. His body modification ends up being kind of significant to the fight. Obviously, in this one, it's how he can interact in all the ways that he does, but also, that he's able to kind of goopify himself to survive at the end. But later with Suzail Aporo, we get that because all of Mayuri's organs have been replaced, he is effectively immune to Suzail's organ crushing techniques. Later on, of course, whenever Mayuri fights Pernida, it's not just significant that Mayuri has modified his own body, but that he has also modified his Bankai. And so that idea of like self-modification extends even to his spiritual powers, which is kind of neat. So there's some kind of thematic consistency there with Mayuri and his powers that are modifiable as well, just as Mayuri is able to modify himself and is willing to kind of modify himself. Yeah, yeah. Of course, it's interesting. We get this big conflict between Ishida and Mayuri, and we get Mayuri kind of over the next couple of chapters really demonized as this enemy of the Quincy, and it's brought up like why that doesn't really come up in the Thousand Year Blood War, but I always felt like, yeah, Mayuri and the way that he interacted with the Quincy was particular towards Ishida, because Mayuri wouldn't have really. I don't know how much Mayuri would have really been around during the time that the Thondenreich and like the people that have been basically sealed in shadow for 1,000 years, how relevant that is, right? Because Mayuri was kind of wasn't he basically imprisoned, and wasn't really let out until Turn Back the Pendulum times, like some of that flashback with I think around then, whenever it was, whenever Kisuke really took him in as his underling. And so it feels as though, like, at least for me, all of Mayuri's kind of crimes against the Quincy are things that would have happened after Yuhabak had been sealed, and that the various Quincy that are invading Soul Society during the Thousand Year Blood War wouldn't even know about this guy, So, like, they wouldn't have any personalized beef, right? At least that's my take. And in a lot of ways, you see that they don't really care about a lot of the other Quincy either, and their thoughts regarding, especially, what is it, Soken or whatever his name is, Ryu. Wow, boy, is it Soken? Ishida's grandfather, that they kind of see him as foolish, and really kind of disregard his position. Yeah, that's about it. That's all I got for now. Hopefully you enjoyed this chapter. If you have any other connections that you see in this one, any other kind of moments that connect to the rest of the series, do let me know. I'm always interested to see those. Anything that you feel like is particularly significant. I think maybe the biggest thing is like this notion of like, okay, well, we already know everything that we need to know about the Quincy. Really represents perhaps like this attitude by Soul Society that like the Quincy aren't a problem anymore, whenever that couldn't be anything further than from the truth. And it turns out to be true, of course, here, where Ishida Uryu proves to Mayuri that there's more to Quincy than he kind of knew, or that they're still a threat, even if he thinks he fully understands them. So I like that there is that kind of parallel there that ends up being a whole thing. But yeah, that's it for this one, folks. Hope you enjoyed it. As always, you can support this channel by giving us a like, by leaving a comment, by subscribing, by sharing this with friends that you think would be interested in it, people you think might be down to clown. Yeah, otherwise, the other big way that you can support is through the Patreon. Right now, you're seeing the names of all of my current supporters on screen. I want to give a huge shout out and thanks to you folks. You are the ones that help make this possible. So, thank you. If you want to get your name up there, go ahead over to the Patreon and support for as much or as little as you like. And without further ado, well, that's the end of it, right? Yeah, this has been Carker Gold, letting you know that spirits are forever with you. Stay gold.